So next we have Tricia Capistrano. The title of the reading is Homesickness, Bequeathed. Tricia Capistrano wrote essays that have appeared in Newsweek, MrBellersNeighborhood.com, and Annie 32, The Global Pinoy, a publication of the Cultural Center of the Philippines. She was co-author of the blog PinoyStudyAbroad.blogspot.com. Tricia was born in Manila and moved to New York City in her early 20s. She now lives in Inwood, New York City with her husband and their son, Emil. Please welcome Tricia Capistrano.
It is 3 in the morning and our 6-year-old son, Emil, is crying. My husband gets out of bed and checks on him so I can go back to sleep. I've only been asleep for half an hour. We are all jet-lagged, having arrived the day before from Manila, where we spent the Christmas holidays with my parents. In the morning, my husband tells me that he rubbed Emil's back for half an hour as our son cried for Lolo and Lola and the rest of the large family we had left behind in the Philippines. My 3 sisters, his older cousins, and my 1.5-year-old niece Sabrina, who adoringly called him Kuya. During our 12-day visit, my cousin's daughters, Mick, 10, and Simi, 7, slept over at my parents' so they could play with Emil every day. Some days the kids would paint their faces and choreograph shows. At night they laughed hysterically at knock-knock jokes and watched movies until they fell asleep. 3 times, my sisters who are in their 20s took them all sightseeing. 2 favorites were the Manila Zoo, where the kids got to shake hands with the orangutan, and the Oceanarium, where the kids enjoyed running around through glass tunnel surrounded by fish. On other days, we visited other relatives' houses where we picked mangoes and went swimming in pools surrounded by lush philodendrons and palms. That's a Kapampangan thing, the F and the P's. In New York City, we are a self-sufficient family unit. Although we live in a neighborhood filled with families whose children are Emil's age, we spend most of our time as a threesome. I've extended family in the United States, but they live far away. But actually, they all turned up here, so thank you for coming. My husband's mom lives in Michigan, and he has no siblings. I was 25 years old when I walked down the brown and white tiled aisle of the Brooklyn church, where my husband and I were married. My parents, my 3 sisters, and several of my cousins all flew in from Manila. I was sentimental about a lot of things that day, but I honestly didn't think twice about making a new life so far from the place I grew up. I certainly didn't think that 10 years later, I would still feel so strongly the pull of that place 8,000 miles away, which a part of me still thinks of as home. Tony and I met at graduate school at New York University, where I was completing a master's degree in graphic communications. I enjoyed my first years in Manhattan enormously. The densely populated neighborhoods of NYU and Midtown Manhattan, where I shared an apartment, gave me a sense of anonymity and freedom that I had never felt from the sometimes stiflingly close family scene back home. Tony and I were both graduate assistants in the communications department. We talked in the office often and one day went out for dinner in a movie. After the film, we had drinks and talked for hours about our families and the people we grew up with. I fell in love on that first date. One Sunday, while we walked through New York City's East Village holding hands, I realized I had found a new home. Tony and I chose to live in Manhattan because we thought this is where we would be happiest. We both love the energy of the city and its diversity. We have been fortunate to find good jobs and good friends. Yet, with each visit back to the Philippines, I feel increasingly ambivalent about that choice. More and more, the return to the dark 2-bedroom apartment in Inwood, in Manhattan, reminds me of our isolation from the relatives and friends who have known me since birth. I unpack immediately, but it's an offer to tell my body that I'm back in New York now, since my heart keeps asking, "And why are you here?" The feeling dissipates as the days go by. I do love living here. I love the parks, walking on the city sidewalks, attending cultural events, and the pluralism of its people. But every so often, in the middle of the night, when I can't sleep, instead of seeing the buildings lit by street lamps across from ours, I see the shadows of the chico tree outside my childhood bedroom window, and I'm in my parents' house again, until the sounds of cars and sirens remind me that I'm not. When Tony told me about Emil's crying on the night we returned from Manila, all I could think of was how, in my efforts to show him my roots and to get him to know my family, I've passed on the pain of having one's heart in two places. It's painful, but it's a good kind of pain, my coworker Fariba said when I told her about Emil's crying. Both of Fariba's parents migrated to the US from Bangladesh, and they flew Fariba and her brothers to Dhaka almost every year when they were young so that they could get to know their grandparents. It was wonderful. I felt so much love, she said. Her many visits to her parents' home, she said, helped strengthen both her sense of self and her sense of belonging to the family. Ironically, 20 years later, many of the cousins she spent time with in Bangladesh now live in different parts of the world. And in some ways, she feels that she has homes in those countries as well. As for Emil, his homecoming sadness has now given way to playdates with neighbors and animated stories about what was happening each day at school. But every once in a while, he will find occasion to talk about our visit. Just the other day, while I was transferring photos from the camera to the computer, Emil came over and said, "Mama, let's hang up pictures of Lolo and Lola, Tita Rina, Tita Carla, Ninang Ces, Ninang Martin, all my cousins, so I won't forget them." And so our lives in New York City continue, and so will our flights to Manila. I've resolved to visit at least every other year so Emil can continue to grow, continue to get to know my family and the place that shaped me. And I hope that on each visit, the inevitable heartbreak that comes afterward will be eclipsed by an abundance of memories and love that he can look back to while in New York City and wherever he chooses to be.